Carbon would be a much more attractive product in its time. But that doesn't mean that we need to give up on token launching. It just means that sometimes this is the way that research and development goes. And so once I've been accused of doing nothing for a long period of time before we started speaking about Carbon, the reality is that you don't sit down and just design something straight away. There are several drafts of an idea that things go through before you end up with the thing that you end up presenting to everyone. So this is, in a way, I guess, is sort of a behind-the-scenes look at like an old abandoned draft of some of the ideas that have since become what we call Carbon, and some of the ideas that are left in here can still be salvaged and used for things in the future. So I think without rambling on too much longer, I think we should just get into it. So the first thing I should say about it is that this is a product that is supposed to service the needs of launching a token for the very first time. So it's not it's not necessarily designed to be something that you might do to sort of raise funds necessarily, like halfway through a project's lifetime, which is becoming more or increasingly relevant discussion today. But that's not what this was designed to do. You can imagine it as being the initial coin offering, for example, of a brand new DeFi project or something that wants a way to raise development money and issue a token at the same time. And so this slide is basically just imagining that there's some brand new token contract that has just been created, and they are that new project is trying to work out what to do with that token supply, right? We know that there are things like DAO treasuries. We know that there's things like vesting so that they can incentivize their own developers to do work in exchange for the token as well. There might be other like liquidity mining rewards or something that they want to do with that token. And so I'm just imagining, there's some example of after the new project has created their new token. Let's just assume that 50% of the total token supply is being put aside for these purposes, and they might use 50% then for that initial market valuation. And I call it an initial market valuation and not an ICO or something, because I still think that maybe even the most important aspect to the product that I'm about to present to you is the ability to find the value of that token in a relatively short period of time, and in a way that doesn't upset anybody. And so it's not just about raising funds; it's also about introducing a brand new cryptocurrency and determining its exchange rate versus a bunch of other tokens without sort of predating on anyone, which I think is the important sort of motivation behind this. And so that 50%, I'm calling this an option allocation, and the important component here is that there are what are called primary, secondary, and tertiary fractions to that option allocation. And so one of the things that you might do is invite some specific individuals. It could, or there could be specific individuals, maybe whitelisted or something else, or it could be community based. And what I'm showing here is that essentially,
Mark, really quickly. I don't know if it's just me, but I just see token launcher V1. I see the original slide still. Glenn, do you see the original slide?
Yeah, I see the original slide. I'm not sure if Mark has switched over to the next slide.
Yeah, we're
okay.
Slides, yeah.
Okay, I thought you said, okay. Perfect, thank you.
Let me, what can you see right now? Still same thing?
No, auction allocation.
Auction allocation.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think then, okay, what I'll do is I'm going to leave it in this format, because I've got a feeling that Discord isn't compatible with presentation view on PowerPoint, but that's okay.
Okay.
Okay, so quickly, is that switching?
You're switching now, yes.
Okay, good. Okay. So when I was talking for a couple of minutes back then, this was the slide that you should have seen, right? So there's a new project. They've got a token contract that was split the supply up into two fractions, and then one of the that 50% that they're using for the initial market valuation is becoming a part of what I'm calling the option allocation, and of that 50% of the total token supply, we're going to further split that up into the primary, secondary, and tertiary fractions. Now, for just for the sake of example here, right, this is all just an illustration. We're imagining that 50% of the token supply that they're using for that initial market valuation is something like 10 million tokens. And just so that we can explore the mechanics of how this works, I've split the primary and secondary fractions into 4 million each, and the tertiary fraction at 2 million. It is pretty important that the secondary fraction be equal in size to the primary fraction. So you can see here that I've got primary equals secondary in size. That should always be true. And I think the primary fraction should generally be something like twice the tertiary fraction, but this isn't that component. So the size of the tertiary fraction is something that can be settled later. Okay, now the important thing here is that the primary fraction is something that you're going to distribute. You basically assume that all of these tokens, every single one of them, is going to go to everyone that participates in this batch auction. And so how this batch auction works is that all we do is advertise how many tokens total are going to be distributed at this time. And then each of the auction participants, and you can see I have 4 of them here, all they do is say how much USDC they would like to contribute to the batch. And so what we do is we add up the total bids from all 4 of these users, and then we work out what the proportion of the bid from each user is as a quotient of the total, and that percentage becomes the same percentage that they receive of this primary fraction. They've got a lot of participants. This is actually a very sort of nice way, like non-exploitative way to determine the price of something and distribute it, because everyone gets exactly the same price. And they won't know ahead of time how many tokens they're going to get, but they do know that no matter the outcome of the distribution, that they will have received the exact same price as everyone else. And so it's just a very, very nice way to get started. Okay, so then we begin this sort of second phase of things. So we know that the primary fraction now has been distributed. So you can see now Alice, Bob, Charlie, and Dave have all got TKN now instead of USDC. And we've got this, what I'm calling ad interim raise, which is the amount of USDC that they paid in order to receive these TKNs. So the primary fraction has been distributed. This is now in users' hands. And we've got the secondary and the tertiary fraction left. And so what we're going to do then is we're going to combine this ad interim raise with the secondary fraction and put it on a constant price bonding curve. The important thing here is that we're essentially in this situation, right? This is the summary slide. The important thing here is that we're going to be using the equations that we now associate with carbon. So these are the augmented bonding curves, and whenever you see this symbol, just know that this is a liquidity pool with the custom bonding curves that you've seen me present on, or I'll talk about a couple of times now. So here, all of the liquidity, every last penny that came from the auction participants gets combined with the same number of tokens that they just bought. And this is going to be important for understanding how you can participate in this auction without taking on any risks. So we set up a bonding curve. This is constant price. And you can see I've got some, I've indicated some helpful numbers here. So, for example, the y-intercept at this point is 24,691,356. And there's the 8 million on the x-intercept. And so what we're showing here is that we're starting at this coordinate, right, 4 million and 12 million. And what this means is that this constant sum bonding curve can absorb, another 4 million tokens before it runs out of USDC liquidity. And as it absorbs those tokens, right, it will be selling them at whatever this rate is, right, 12 million over 4 million. And this is significant because that rate, 12 million over 4 million, is exactly the rate that that each one of these users paid for every last way of the tokens that they have. And if we add up all of the token auction participants, they have 4 million. So this bonding curve can actually allow every single one of these participants to completely reverse their decision, completely risk-free, right? If they think that they've bought too much, they can get rid of it all, right? You can completely back out of this auction, even though the tokens have already been distributed. And there'll be the only thing that you will be out of pocket is the gas that it costs to participate, which should be virtually nothing. Okay. So again, here's a summary slide. We're going to keep coming back to this because you don't want to keep this at constant price all the time. So there's a couple of things we should realize about this. Like, yeah, sure, it's nice that we've distributed some tokens and people can trade them back with this constant price curve. But if at the moment, this is still the only liquidity that this token has anywhere. And so it will never appreciate or depreciate in value. It will just have the same value all the time. And it kind of defeats the purpose of having a cryptocurrency because you can't really buy it or sell it with, you can't really buy or sell things with it. You can't trade it with someone. You can't exchange it for other cryptocurrencies. So we are going to have to adjust this over time to introduce price discovery so that the market can decide how much this cryptocurrency is worth. And we also want to make sure that, participants in the auction understand that it's not going to hold this constant price over time and that eventually we're going to have to establish a market for it. So this is now beginning a couple of important steps as we move towards establishing a fair market in full view of all of the people that bought this crypto in a very predictable and regimented way. Jen, can you just confirm for me on this slide that you see Alice and her token balance is highlighted in yellow?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to start assuming that after the auction has finished, that the users can now all see each other's balances, and the curve has been set up, and so they can start trading against it. And so Alice here is noticed that she's the largest token holder. And often during these kinds of token distributions, the largest whale for that token starts to become a little bit apprehensive of that decision, right? They can become resentful or regretful because becoming the largest single token holder in a project isn't necessarily a good thing. And so the advantage here is that Alice can start to wind back her position. So what I'm showing is that she has essentially decided that she wants to roll back her position so that she is equal to the second largest whale, so that they both together are the equal largest token holders, and that means that neither one of them necessarily bears the same responsibility as being the single greatest. And so she is going to give back this 666,000 TKN back to the auction essentially. And what's interesting is that because of the way that we've set up this constant price curve, she can just put all of those TKNs back onto it and extract exactly the USDC that she paid for them, and she will not pay any greater or lower price than any of the other auction participants. And we can prove that by looking at this slide here. which is if you just have a look at, what Alice and Bob both bid and adjust Alice's bid for the USDC that she's now received back from the pool, then you can see that it's now equal to Bob's bid, right, at 3,429,000, right? Here's 3,429,000. And Alice, of course, now has the exact same number as tokens as Bob. So this is a retroactive adjustment of Alice's activity because she wasn't satisfied with the original distribution of tokens at the end of the auction. And this means that there isn't all of that same sort of shenanigans that usually surround, token launches. Because even though Alice is reversing her position here, all of the other auction participants remain unaffected. And she's taking this action on chain in full view of everyone so that they can examine each other's actions and respond if they want to. So let's say that this indeed happened, and now Alice is the equal whale to Bob, and Charlie watches Alice do that. Now Charlie's in the opposite position to what Alice was just a moment ago, because Charlie has the fewest tokens of everybody. And so maybe Charlie doesn't feel comfortable that that he is, the weakest token holder of the group, and so he is going to take some USDC, some additional USDC that he didn't participate in the auction with before, and trade that back with this constant sum curve, and again move its balances around. So he's traded this USDC for 277,000 TKN. He's done that to round his position up to 500,000. And so note that he's still the weakest token holder, but only by a small margin, right? He was competing with, the next lowest was already at something like almost 1 million TKN before. And so now Charlie feels slightly better about his status within the project and within the token ecosystem. And Alice and Bob and Dave all watched him do it, and they don't mind because that action did not impact any of them. Because right now, and in fact at any point while this constant price curve remains intact, they can all decide to sell all of their tokens, and they will all just get a full refund of all of the USDC that they put in, and that's something that I don't want you to forget. Okay. Now we're going to assume that a fifth person shows up, Erin, right? And maybe she was on holidays, or maybe, she didn't hear about the auction or something, but she wished that she was able to participate in this auction. So she's upset that the auction happened without her, and that's okay. So she can now show up to the system and decide that, she actually does want some of these TKNs and she wants to be a part of it. And we're not going to penalize her at all. So there's no disadvantage to being late. And she's going to put in 3 million USDC, and she is going to receive 1 million 1 million TKN for that purchase. And this would be exactly the same. We would have got pretty much exactly the same result, at least with respect to the value that all of the token providers have. If Erin had participated in the auction in the first place with that amount. And that's, I think, an important thing to realize, that the fact that Erin is now doing this, again, no one cares, because it doesn't change their capacity to back out of this decision. If, I don't know, maybe Erin is a problematic character or something in cryptocurrency, and they don't feel comfortable being in a project with her. If she is buying these tokens and someone says, okay, I don't want to be in a project with her, they can still back out by selling all of their tokens at exactly the same price as before Erin decided to participate. So, the fact that this is happening in full view of everyone, and that there is still no risks to adjusting your position in the project as time rolls on, I think is a really important and missing component from the way that we do token launches today. So now we've moved from 4 auction participants up to 5. You can see that I've been moving this balance back and forth a little bit as time rolls on. So now let's say that that's the end, right? Dave So Charlie and Alice have both adjusted their positions, and Erin, the latecomer, has come in and decided that she actually does want to be a part of this, and so she's bought some tokens. We're going to call this the end of phase one. And so what we want to do at the end of phase one is we want to start warping the curve a little bit, but we want to make sure that its price remains the same, right? So it's not fair that at the end of this process that that we then make a change to the curve and immediately open an arbitrage opportunity or something like that. And so I'm going to get into this. But this is the way that I'm going to organize these slides, because you're going to see a lot more of them. Is that we're looking at essentially constants that indicate how this curve should be shaped. And if anyone's read through the white paper or the light paper or the invention disclosure, you'll already be familiar with these. And over time, I'm hoping to have more of these DAO discussions so that we can design more of these products together. But essentially, this is the gray box is the phase that we're currently on. And then the new box is how we are going to adjust those curve parameters. And so here you can see that N is moving from 0 to 0.1. X0 is moving back from 4 million to 3 million. And Y0 is moving from 12 million to 14 million. Okay. And so this is just if you change all of these naively. And so what I'm indicating here is that if you actually do an analysis on the bonding curve after performing such a change, then you would have realized that the marginal price of the TKN being sold on the curve before the change was conducted was -3, and after this change is being conducted, it's moving to -4, and that is problematic. Now, the reason why we are getting that change is because we have essentially changed the relative balances of USDC and TKN inside the pool. And so if we just simply move N to a higher number, then necessarily the price will move, right? And so in order to force the price to stay the same, we can do a relatively quick calculation here, right? So we know that we want to keep the amount of TKN that we currently have available to us, right? Because this is still part of the secondary fraction of the token launch of the token launch budget, and we want to use all of that. So what we can do is keep that at the amount that is required, by using the maximum amount, and then calculate Y0 such that we actually do get the price that we were expecting. And so what I'm showing here in yellow is just how that calculation works. It's not too complicated. So we take the marginal price equation. We know what X0 and K are equal to. And so we can just plug in the marginal price formula and then derive Y0 essentially as a function of things that we already know. And so that's where that number comes from. Now, it's important to realize here that we're starting with 12 million USDC in the system, or we're moving to a system that has 10 million USDC in the system. And so this process is again, not too difficult to understand. In order to move the curve from one of infinite liquidity amplification or constant price with no slippage to a system that has a small amount of slippage, which means that the pool can also deal with price discovery, we need to create what I'm calling a USDC ballast. And so in this system, what happens is that we are deliberately removing from the pool, in this case, about 4 million in USDC. And this would become a part of a different auction reservoir that can be used for that has specific use cases. We can talk about that in just a minute. But the point that I need you to realize here is that we've performed a calculation, and that calculation told us exactly how many USDC we want to have on the curve in order to have a curve with a curvature profile that is predetermined by the schedule of the auction. And so this USDC is slowly going to be, is pulled out slowly by the system, and we're going to use it again later. So don't worry, like this isn't going to disappear. This is obviously a lot of USDC. And we're going to use it in the reverse direction again soon after we see what option participants do with the slightly increased curvature of their new pool. So again, this is a system sort of snapshot. We can see all of the token balances that users have here for people keeping track at home. We've got the the pool reserve balances of both USDC and TKN. We've got a tertiary fraction of TKN that we've never used, and we've got this new USDC ballast, which is now off curve, and we're going to have a look at what its purpose is in just a moment. The pool is now looking like this. Believe it or not, this is not a straight line. I know it looks like that way, but this is actually a 10x concentrated liquidity pool. And you can see I've got its y-intercept and x-intercept indicated, which will tell you, essentially how many tokens it can absorb before it runs out of the other token in liquidity. And then I've got the log scale here, so you can see, how this shape evolves over time. Constant product, by the way, is a straight line all the way through this. Okay, so this is now the pool, and we're going to have a look at again Alice, who's interested in rage quitting apparently, right? So Alice decides that actually maybe she's found some, she knows someone on the token team, for example, and she's decided that she doesn't like them, or that she knows them personally and doesn't think they do good work or something. And so she is now going to decide that she doesn't want any of these tokens anymore, and she just wants to get out of the system. So she's going to sell her entire balance. Now remember, she could have done this at any point in the first phase, and she would have got every single cent of her USDC back. But because she's waited for a very slight curvature to be introduced into the system, that's no longer true. So she's basically, she's missed her opportunity to change her mind completely without penalty, and that means that she's going to pay a very, very small premium for this option, but it's still very, very, very small compared to how token options are generally handled. So in this case, she's able to swap those 1,111,000 TKNs for 3.319 million USDC. And if we have a look at her initial bid, right, which is the total number of USDC that she actually paid in order to get those tokens, it's a higher number, right? It's about 100,000 more than the USDC she's getting back at this step. So this is a technical loss. And in a way, this also introduces a small amount of gamification, right? This is the stakes are now a little bit higher, and the users, the participants of this auction, need to start thinking very carefully about about the decisions that they're making. And still, I want to point out there that this is still, for a token auction, is still pretty good. Right, if you were to do this on a lot of the token release platforms that I was looking at when I was developing these ideas, there is basically no way that you can get rid of what was, I think, almost a third. Right, this is more than a quarter of the entire token supply that was distributed to users. Right, so she's selling more than 25% of all tokens held by users, and for that she's paying really minimum slippage. So I use this as an extreme example, so to point out that yes, it's true that now the reversibility of your decisions is no longer completely scot-free, but it's still so minor that I think that it's it's still attractive. So it's a very, very gentle, slow passage into price discovery. So after that's happened, you need to realize that because X has changed in its, the TKN balance has changed from 3 million to 4.4 million. That means now that because we're moving on, we're still moving down this hyperbola, that there's going to be a new gradient at that point. And so you can see here kind of the total prices that are discoverable by this curve. And so we started at a price of about, $3.10. And after selling 25% of the token supply, the price moved to $2.89, right? So that's, if nothing else, let that show you just how gentle this process really is. And at worst, it looks like this price would, if people exhausted the USDC of this curve, it looks like it would actually balance out at about $2.50. So the maximum that this token can dump at this stage in the price discovery cycle is only as far as $2.50, and the maximum price that it can increase to is somewhere around $3.80. So I'm calling this bounded price discovery, right? And that's a feature of this, because you don't really want to give it, full curve, infinite price discovery in both directions until you have, some understanding of how these market participants are going to use that developing price discovery. Okay. So after Alice rage quit, we now have a new price. And let's say that no one does anything else in that phase. So we started, with these parameters. And what we're going to do now is we're going to move the pool from 10x concentration down to 5x concentration. Now, the reason we're moving to less concentrated liquidity, by the way, is because we're still trying to learn what the price of this token is. If we move, if we were increasing concentration or maintaining the liquidity concentration at the rate that it's currently at, then this token would never be worth less than $2.50 and never be worth more than $3.80. And so the market really, it's not going to be able to make up its mind about what this token is worth using just this bonding curve. And so part of the option is to slowly make this curve more and more convex, right, to increase the curvature so that new market participants and existing market participants can actually change the value of the token. So we're going to move from 10x concentration down to 5x concentration. And again, we need to make sure that we're not doing anything wrong. And so here, when we perform this calculation to try and get Y0, the reason why this is in red is that we actually need more USDC than we started with. Okay, so we're keeping the token balance the same, right? But the USDC needs to change because we're moving to a less concentrated curve as we were before, which means that the USDC reserve needs to change as the curvature changes. And now, rather than taking USDC out of the curve, you need to put USDC into the curve. Okay, so what I'm looking at here is essentially that we want to increase we want to increase the USDC from 7 to 12, right? Which is this number up here, which is that if you wanted to keep all of the TKN that you have a part of the option still, then we actually need more USDC than the system raised. And obviously that's impossible. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that USDC ballast from before, and we're going to push this USDC back into the system, right? So we're going to completely drain this USDC ballast wallet. We're going to increase the USDC amount to the maximum that we can, and then we're going to go back and we're going to recalculate X0 instead. And X0 here is calculated pretty much the same way that the Y0 is, except that you flip dx dy on its head, which is why I've got these arrows here, just to remind anyone looking at this presentation to remember to make the reciprocal of the price. And that allows us to calculate then a new X0 value, which is only 3,800,000. So we can use all of the USDC that the system currently has. We're going to reduce the token allocation or the TKN reserve balance by a little, and that means that our price, right, between this change in curvature remains absolutely still, and that means that there won't be an arbitrage opportunity created as the curve changes shape. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take that tertiary fraction. Remember, we haven't done anything with it yet. And we're going to remove part of this token balance down by 640,000. And we're just going to add that to this tertiary fraction. And so this is kind of a, like an overflow box or something that we can use for this kind of activity. So the tertiary fraction now has slightly more in it. It started with 2 million, now it's got 2,640,000. We're out of USDC ballast, which is a shame, but it's not the end of the world. And we've now got these new token reserves. We can see all of the user balances over here. And Alice is currently still in rage quit status with 0, but everyone else has got basically all the tokens that they started with. Our token, our bonding curve is now starting to look a little bit more bendy. Hopefully, you can see that some of that curvature is starting to get dialed in. I've still indicated the X and Y intercepts in red, and those are obviously the same X and Y intercepts in red on logarithmic scale. And you should be able to see that there's a little bit more curvature appearing down here. It's not as sharp. And I still find examining this thing in log scale to be like just much more helpful than looking at it in the traditional plot mode. Okay, so this is the point that we've arrived at, and now we're going to see how we're going to examine some possible reactions that other users might have to this change. So Bob, for example, he's noted that because of the change in liquidity that's just occurred, right? There's actually now more USDC available, more USDC liquidity available in the system than there was before. And the token is now at a lower price than what he originally bought it for. And so if he is still, feeling, pretty optimistic. So it's actually, so he's going to do the opposite. So Bob is, he also decides that that he doesn't want to have, so many tokens anymore. I think Bob's motivation when I originally wrote this presentation was that he now realizes that because Alice is out of the game, he is now a mega whale, right? He has more than 2x, Charlie's stack. He's got, still substantially more than Dave does. He's even got more than Aaron, right? Who is this latecomer who bought up a lot of tokens. And so maybe at this point, after noticing Alice's rage quit, he also gets uncomfortable. But rather than just getting rid of all of the tokens, he decides that that he wants to just half the amount that he has. So he's kind of closer to this kind of midsection in terms of token holders. And so he's going to get rid of exactly half, 555.55. And for that, he's going to be able to extract 1.5 million USDC from the curve, which is fine. It's important to realize here that because the X coordinate has moved from 3.8 million to 4.3 million, that there is going to be a change in the price again, and because we're now on a 5x amplified pool as opposed to a 10x amplified pool, that change is now on a much more comprehensive price schedule. So you can see now that as we moved from 3.8 to 4.3, the price of this token changed from $2.89 to $2.73. But even though it's still bounded, right, we can still see that at the edge here, this limit I think used to be somewhere around $2.50. It's now only bounded at $1.85, right? So the price actually can't increase as far as it used to. Partly because we had to change the liquidity around down here in order to keep the price the same as we changed the curvature. However, to the upside, this token can increase as far as $4.47. Whereas before, I think it could only get as far as about $1.89 or something. I can't remember exactly I can't remember exactly what the number was before. We can check. So in the previous example, yeah, we could only get it as far as
I think you said
yeah,
$3.80.
Yeah, $3.80. Thank you. And now we're getting it much farther than that, right? We can now get it up to $4.50. And Bob knows this, right? Everyone knows this. Everyone can see what's happening here because the way that these equations perform is deterministic, and you can imagine building a product and a front end around this that demonstrates what's going to happen in the next leg of the cycle. And you can simulate what trades are doing and that kind of thing. So this is the important part, right? Where the price discovery, right? The actual price range available to this token at any point in the process is actually known ahead of time by all option participants. Okay, so now we're going to see what happens here. So Charlie, who hasn't really done anything yet, his motivations are the ones that I originally mistook for Bob's. He's now looking at the fact that the token price is lower than what he originally paid for it. And there's actually more liquidity in the system for that token than there used to be. And so he's actually going to perform a trade here to take advantage of the relative discount in the TKN compared to its original option price. And so he is going to essentially buy everything that Bob sold. Okay. So he's going to pay that 1.56 million USDC in order to buy everything that Bob just put into the system. And so now Bob, Charlie becomes something of a whale himself, and maybe apparently he doesn't mind, right? It's a personal choice. It's not a bad thing being a whale. I don't want anyone to think that I'm picking on them, but some people are uncomfortable with it, which is why Alice and Bob took the actions that they did. But clearly, Charlie doesn't mind, and so he's now on par with Aaron in terms of token supply, and actually slightly higher than that. Okay, so after Bob sold his stack and Charlie basically bought that same stack, the interesting thing here is that there wasn't really any change in the pool, right? We want to move from a 5x concentrated to a 2x concentrated pool, right? Again, this is just as a thought experiment. You could do this, much more gently than that. I consider that to be quite violent, but to try and get the presentation as concise as possible, we're going to just start accelerating this. So the X0 and Y0 parts may not actually need to change. And so what I'm looking at here is sort of a very quick way that you can decide how things should work, right? So basically, if the token balance that you have is equal to one of these fundamental constants at the end of the last cycle, that ballasting is not required for that token. And if the other token is equal to some fundamental constant at the end of the last cycle, then also ballasting is not required. And that's really important to note because neither one of these fundamental constants is necessarily predicated on this curvature factor. So because during that whole last phase, all we ended up looking at was Bob selling off this amount of tokens for this amount of USDC, and then Charlie immediately buying that same amount of tokens from the pool with the same amount of USDC. We haven't actually seen any overall change in the token balances. And so we can move from any curvature amount to any other curvature amount, and there will be no ballast, right? We don't need to add USDC to the curve or take any out. We don't need to add tokens to the curve or take any out. We can feel free to simply start bending the curve, which is helpful. So we get to skip that ballasting stage in this case, which is nice. You can see on the log scale, we're starting to get this really nice shoulder appearing. And on the traditional plot at 2x concentration, this is starting to look a lot more curvy than it used to. And again, the Y and X intercepts have been reset. Okay, so back at the situation where the auctioneers are starting to look at what's happening and what opportunities might be available to them. We're going to consider a situation where Alice has cold feet, and she didn't really want to back out of this thing. Maybe she was just trying to psych everyone out or something and get more tokens for herself at a discount. Maybe that just failed, and she's deciding that she actually does want back in this program. So she's going to take those USDC, and she's going to now swap them back with the pool. But notice that the amount of TKN that she can get from this is now reduced, right? And you know that it's going to be reduced because the curvature that she's waited for with respect to how this option is progressing is now more more violent. It has more slippage in it than it used to. And in a way, that's the same as saying it has more price discovery than it used to. So we're moving the X coordinate now from 3.8 million down to 2.8 million. And you can see now that the price curve is starting to look a lot more familiar. And so the effect that this had, right, when she moved that token balance down from 3.8 to 2.8, is that the price is now at $3.79, which is pretty good. And we can see now at 2x, right, the minimum price for this token, so the maximum that it can dump down to is 72 cents. But to the upside, the maximum valuation of this token, it looks like to be around like almost $12. And again, this type of chart is something you can actually show everyone, right? There's no reason to keep this hidden. You can show everyone at what point in the auction their tokens would be, become more volatile in price, and exactly what the bounds on that price is. And so I call this like a broadening price range feature that is just sort of again showing that the actions of taken by our participants, they have more and more consequences over time, which means that they've kind of got this advantage of being able to react before the consequences are so dramatic that they feel like they've been that they've been injured by the way that the token launch was performed. Okay. So we're just going to quickly run through a couple of these examples before this gets too repetitive. But essentially now Dave here, he decides that he also wants some more tokens. And so, he's putting in another 2.7 million. He extracts now 652,000 TKN. And he moves the balance of these TKNs down from 2.8 to 2.1 million, which means that we're now at a price of $4.66. So this is pretty dramatic, right? At the beginning of this phase, the price was only $2.89, and now you can see even just a 2x amplification. There's really quite a lot of volatility in the system now, and so this is when sort of the game is starting to the trading strategies that people are implementing when they participate in these sorts of systems is starting to become more more important to consider. Okay. So we do the same thing again, right? Except this time we're going to move from a 2x concentration down to a 50% concentrated, right? And eventually the idea here is that we can walk this all the way down to 0% concentrated, right? Which would be standard constant product, full spectrum price discovery. And so all of those processes we're repeating as before. We know that what we need X0 to be, we know what we need X to be, and so forth. And so we have a look at the resources that we have left after all of this action. And in this case, we need to ballast out actually 10 million USDC from the system here. Oh, sorry, it's 6.7 million USDC from the system in order to achieve the Y0 amount that we were asking for. So that moves some more tokens into the USDC ballast wallet. And if we have a quick snapshot of the system, how it looks like, we can see that we've got some tokens in the tertiary fraction. We've got some USDC left in the ballast. We can see what the token reserves are and what all of the option participants' balances currently look like. And again, you can see at 50% concentration, this is starting to look very, very curvy. And I think, again, on the logarithmic axis, it looks a lot prettier, a lot easier, more intuitive to understand. Okay, so at this point in the auction, we're coming like right to the end, because obviously in the next leg, it's going to be full constant product. We're going to see what some people want to do here. So Charlie's decided that he wants to halve his stack. So he's going to swap a bunch of these TKNs back with the pool in order to extract out some more of this USDC, because, you know, for whatever reason, we're not really going to consider their motives anymore. Again, because he's moving the X coordinate from 2.1 to 2.7, then this is going to have a price impact on the token. And here you can see, yeah, at 50% concentrated, you now have a really broad, price range, but it's still bounded, right? It still has absolute limits. So to the upside, it looks like the maximum token value here is going to be like $42.8. And to the downside, I think the minimum is 50 cents. Okay, so that's the token cannot be worth less than 50 cents, and it cannot be worth more than about $44. Okay, so after Charlie's taken that action, we've now got a new price. He managed to move it from $4.66 down to $3.46, which is pretty dramatic. And I think the reason I wanted to make it a dramatic change here is to demonstrate that we're now sort of entering real, proper price discovery territory, where you can no longer, sell off 25% of the token supply like Alice did and have a meaningless impact on the token price. Okay, so after that's happened, again, we go through that same process of working out as we move from 50% concentration down to 0% concentration. So this is now going to go to constant product. We need to decide what the token reserves are going to be. And you can follow that same process as before, but also we know that when you go to constant product, that the marginal rate is just the ratio of the two reserves. So if you wanted to, you could just calculate Y and X that way. But I think for consistency, I've just left it the same calculation all the way through. Okay, so in this case, we now need to increase the amount of USDC in the curve in order to keep the price constant. So here we are taking some money out of the USDC balance. So we've got, I think, at the moment, 6.7 million. And that's going to come down to 5.4 million. And that's going to increase the amount of USDC liquidity on the constant product curve from 8 million to 9 million. And this is the state of the system at the end of the, basically at the end of this process, at the end of the distribution process. So essentially, this is when I said, okay, this is the desired state, right? This is the end game. We've now got some liquidity, for this token, and I consider this to be permanent liquidity that doesn't belong to anyone, that doesn't have any liquidity providers. It's simply there to ensure that new participants in the market and existing participants in the market for this token have always got some liquidity to use, and it's never going to go away. And I think this is why it also makes sense to do this versus a stablecoin, something relatively good like USDC. The tertiary fraction USDC balance, obviously the fate of these things we need to discuss in just a couple of slides. But yeah, this is kind of where we wanted to settle down on a constant product bonding curve with a decent amount of liquidity in it that can support infinite price discovery for this token project over time. Okay, then if you have a look at the state of the pool, this is now perfect constant product, right? So these are no longer X and Y intercepts, but actually X and Y asymptotes. So these are at 0. It's actually the same thing for constant product. And you can see that the black line has now finally approached the constant product gray line, and we just draw a straight line of 45 degrees across the chart. Okay, so then the question is, what do we do with these things, right? Because the token launch still has this value that's left over. there's a couple of things that you could imagine doing with this. So, for example, because the token was launched, obviously, a lot of these tokens, could be used for to give back to the project at some fixed percentage, or maybe they take the stable coin and a part of the tertiary fraction, and then part of the tertiary fraction is shared with the Bancor DAO or whatever. But essentially, this is where we settle up. Because the service for providing the token launch is you want it to be sort of a scaling system depending on how successful that token launch is. So it could be percentage based, that both parties take some of this, or it could be up to some maximum. Like say they have an extremely successful token launch and they raise like billions of dollars or something. They don't want to be paying hundreds of millions of dollars to the Bancor DAO for that, so there might be some cap or whatever. But the point is that this is the fruit in a way, or really actually it's the USDC ballast that's really the fruit of this token launch. And so that value that has been accumulated, obviously most of it just needs to go back to the project in order to fund their activities. But this is where sort of the bills are paid and the value extraction can occur that would allow Bancor to succeed in indefinitely. And so that's basically the end, right? I've got some apparently there's some other slides back here. Oh yeah, this is unfinished. So don't worry about that. This is just this is garbage that I never finished working on. So don't worry about that. But yeah, that's it. That's essentially the token launcher. I want to remind everyone right at the end of this call, if you've made it this far, that this is not something that I'm proposing that we do at the moment. I still like the idea of it. I think that the market isn't really in the right place right now for something like this to be a good idea in the immediate term. But I think if nothing else, let it be sort of a demonstration of sort of some of the stuff that happens that you never really get to see, right? And I've said this before on community calls, is that I tend to keep this stuff to myself until things are ready to present, until I think I fully understand an idea, and it's only when it's fully developed in my mind that I'm happy to share it with anyone. So this, I don't want you to think that this is something that I just don't share with people in Discourse or something like that. I literally don't share this with anyone. And then I showed this to some developers, and we do some product research and that kind of thing to determine how attractive it is, and we find out what's good, what's bad, what needs to change. And I think in this particular case, the thing that was interesting was the bonding curve and the fact that we've got this new mathematical description for it, and that I have this such a complete understanding of what it does and how to manipulate it and what its power is, that applying it to limit orders and creation of user trading strategies was like the obvious next application, right? The thing that we salvaged from this proposal, from this idea, that can be applied to something that actually makes sense in the current market. But I still think, overall, as a token launching concept, it still holds water, right? There is something valuable here. And so, the reason we did this presentation was because it was asked for. Someone had already asked whether Carbon could be used to create a token launcher. And the irony of that question is that it's from a token launcher that Carbon was created. We can still do stuff like this, right? We still have all of these settings on Carbon that could be used to literally achieve this, right? It's precisely the same technology. And so, as the space develops and heals from the stuff that's going on with FTX and stuff that's going on with Binance and so forth, I think that we should, as a community, start considering whether or not this is the sort of direction that we want to go. You could imagine, right, for like releasing a standalone product and calling it, another element in the periodic table, like Oxygen or something, and use that as the de facto token launching technology available to projects, and it could be done trustlessly and permissionlessly and so on. But if regulation is caught up with us by then we might have to do it another way. But whatever. The point is that the ideas and technology behind Carbon are sufficiently general that you can use it for these types of applications if you want. So I think that's all I wanted to say about it. And I'm happy to take any questions, by the way, if someone had something that they wanted to ask.
Thank you so much, Mark, for doing this, going through all your slides with us and explaining it all. I think it's super valuable.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I was going to say we're going to have this on YouTube as well in the next, I think, few hours once we get the video sorted out, and then it should be available there for anyone that wants to watch it as well.
Yeah, and we'll go ahead and share it throughout the channels as well. Cool. Well, if you guys do have any questions, I don't see any hands up. If you do have any questions, go ahead and put them in. I would probably say Carbon general would be more accurate, or you could go ahead and do it in live stage calls. Glenn, correct me if I'm wrong, but even after the call is over, they can still go ahead and comment in there and ask their questions, right?
Yeah, they can go in there, but I think Carbon general, we usually use that channel for, well, things are going live. But yeah, I don't see anything there besides a comment from Stefan, I think, about one of his ideas that was kind of similar, I think, around like token launchpads.
Cool. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining the DAO discussion today. You have feedback and everything else, send me a message. I always want to hear about it. And any questions and things, you can send them to me. You could put them in the channels. We'll keep an eye out for them.
Cool.
Mark, thank you
for coming around. Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime.
Awesome. You guys have a good one. Thanks so much.